It's one of those really gorgeous autumnal days here in Wiltshire, and I've got in the office before anybody else, so I thought before the day gets underway I'll try and talk a little bit about costs and how we cost projects. I'm going to do a bit, probably on another podcast, on what we do that's different to a QS, so I'll leave that for another time. But right now I just wanted to try and talk a bit about the process of getting to a fixed cost for a project. It's worth bearing in mind, of course, that we design and build bespoke houses, so I'm not talking here about buying something off the shelf, something from a catalogue of house designs. I'm talking about something that's bespoke, so we're starting actually with a blank sheet of paper. So at the outset, what we do is, having taken a brief with the client, actually it's more about evolving a brief with a client. Clients often come with some ideas, they've got a good idea of their likes and dislikes, but it's always worth spending some time developing that brief so they've really fully explored what's possible. And having got that brief, we'll have understood the likely size of the house, the likely design complexity of the house, things like number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, how many are en suite, what family bathroom have we got, what sort of level of specification are they looking for the kitchen, and of course, are they going to have oak frame, are they not going to have oak frame, and so on. So at that point we can estimate a cost per square metre for the build. We'll have a very good idea of what it's going to cost to build this house, or at least we'll have a good idea of what a sufficient budget would look like. So that's our starting point at day one. Then as the scheme evolves up to planning, we use a lot of, call it due diligence, about making sure, which is all about making sure that the design is not too big, not too complicated, and at our estimate would come in and can be built at that original estimated cost per square metre. You want to be really sure when you go to planning that you're getting planning permission for a house that you can afford to build. So post-planning, once we've got the planning permission, we start on what's known as construction drawings, and that's where we get into an awful lot more detail. We also pull together with the client a very detailed specification. Now, as that all evolves, and it is an evolving, developing process, we guide and advise the client on the likely cost implications of the decisions they're making. There are loads and loads of decisions to make as a design evolves. So we can guide the client as they make those decisions, whether it be kitchens or bathrooms, whether it be underfloor heating, or whether they go for gas, or what materials they go for. Do they go for a machine-made brick or a handmade brick, and so on. We can guide and advise them on the cost implications of those decisions and help them make sure they're keeping their build within their budget. Now, ultimately, where we get to, having got construction drawings, detailed specification, so we can now start talking to a main contractor, or we can go to tender. Two slightly different processes, again, which I'll cover under another podcast. But what we can now start to do is get real cost back from the industry on what this is going to cost to build. And then we go into a process of essentially negotiation, discussions with a contractor to make sure we're getting really good value for money for the client. Not necessarily cheapest, but really good value for the client. So that process continues normally for a number of weeks until we're confident, the client's confident they're getting the build they want at a fair market price. And at that point, we can then move to a contractual position where we've essentially got a fixed price for the construction of the house. So in summary, we start with an unknown, but talk about estimate cost per square metre based on the level of design and specification the client is looking for. Some due diligence up to planning. Post-planning, as we get into real detail around construction drawings and specification, we can start to elicit actual costs for things and develop the cost plan to a fixed price that will ultimately form part of the contract.